waiter at Bella Vista placed the chocolate cake in front of me with theatrical flair, complete with sparklers that hissed and popped like tiny fireworks. 40 candles flickered in the dim restaurant lighting, casting shadows across the faces of people I thought I knew. My wife Laura sat to my right, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a wine glass, that practiced smile stretched across her lips like plastic wrap. "Make a wish, honey," she said, her voice carrying that saccharine tone she used when performing for an audience. I looked around the table at the assembled crowd. Laura's parents, George and Mara Staples, sat across from me with expressions that reminded me of vultures waiting for roadkill. Laura's co-workers from the marketing firm clustered together, their phones already out, recording every moment for their social media feeds. My supposed best friend, Danny Morrison, sat near the end of the table, avoiding eye contact, while his wife, Jennifer, kept whispering something in his ear. But it was Scott Williams who caught my attention. Laura's business associate stood near the bar, nursing a whiskey and checking his Rolex every few minutes. 6'2", perfectly styled hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He'd been showing up at a lot of Laura's work events lately. "Come on, Jay," Laura pressed, her voice getting that edge it developed when things weren't going according to her script. "Everyone's waiting." I closed my eyes and made my wish. I wished I'd never met Laura Staples. I wished I'd listened to my gut 15 years ago when she first started changing, becoming someone I didn't recognize. I wished I'd paid attention to the late-night phone calls, the sudden business trips, the way she flinched when I touched her. I blew out the candles. The table erupted in polite applause, phones flashing as everyone captured the moment for posterity. Laura leaned over and kissed my cheek, a brief cold peck that felt more like a business transaction than affection. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out. I think it was Kim from Laura's office, the one who lived for drama and treated other people's lives like her personal reality show. George Staples stood up, his considerable bulk casting a shadow across the table. At 65, Laura's father still carried himself like the corporate executive he'd been before retirement, all authority and barely contained disdain for anyone he considered beneath his station, which in his mind included me. "Actually," George said, his voice cutting through the restaurant chatter, "I have something for Jason." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. My stomach dropped. I'd seen enough legal documents in my 20 years as a cop to recognize them from across a room. "From all of us," George continued, his smile carnivory. "Consider it a birthday gift." The envelope landed on the table next to my cake with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Laura's friends leaned forward, sensing drama. Scott had moved closer, positioning himself where he could see everything unfold. I opened the envelope with steady hands, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Divorce papers, petition for dissolution of marriage, Laura Michelle Halpern versus Jason Robert Halpern, filed 3 days ago. "Surprise," Laura said softly, her phone already recording my reaction. I thought it was time we both got what we really wanted. The papers detailed everything. She wanted the house, half my pension, alimony, and primary custody of our daughters. She documented alleged emotional misuse and financial control. She'd painted me as a controlling, angry ex-cop who'd made her life miserable for years. All lies. But lies that would play well in family court. "You couldn't have done this privately?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "Where's the fun in that?" Kim laughed, still filming. "This is going straight to TikTok. Worst birthday ever is going to trend." Danny Morrison finally looked at me, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Jay, man, we didn't know." "Yes, you did," I said quietly. "You all knew exactly what this was." I stood up, folding the papers carefully and slipping them into my jacket pocket. The restaurant had gone quiet around us, other diners turning to watch the show. The sparklers on my cake had burned out, leaving only smoke and the smell of sulfur. "Well," I said, looking around the table at these people who'd been part of my life for so many years. "This has been educational." Laura's smile faltered slightly. I think she'd expected anger, maybe tears, certainly some kind of scene that would justify her narrative. Instead, I pulled out my wallet and placed $200 on the table. "That should cover my portion of dinner," I said. "Happy birthday to me." I walked toward the exit, aware of every eye in the restaurant following me. As I reached the door, I heard Scott's voice behind me. "Don't take it too hard, old man. Some of us just aren't built for the long game." I paused, my hand on the door handle, and turned back to look at him. Scott Williams, 35 years old, owner of 3 fitness centers, recently divorced himself. The man who'd been sleeping with my wife for the past 8 months. You're right, I said. Some of us aren't. Then I walked out into the cool October night and pulled out my phone. Deb? I said when she answered. It's on. Time for the real party. The storage unit sat in an industrial complex 20 minutes outside town. One of those places where people kept the overflow from their lives. Christmas decorations, old furniture, things they couldn't bear to throw away but didn't want to look at every day. Unit 47B had been mine for 6 months, paid for in cash, registered under my middle name. I rolled up the metal door and flicked on the overhead bulb. 3 filing cabinets lined the back wall, each one labeled and organized with the precision that had made me a good detective. Box A contained financial records, bank statements, credit reports, tax documents. Box B held photographs, printed emails, phone records. Box C was the insurance policy, the nuclear option I'd hoped never to use. But hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. I'd started building this collection the day I found Laura's burner phone in the laundry room, hidden in the pocket of a jacket she never wore. The phone that contained 6 months of text messages between her and Scott, planning their affair with the casual cruelty of people who thought they were untouchable. Jason's working late again, one message read. Perfect. My place at 8. Can't wait to be rid of him, Laura had replied. Few more months, and we'll have everything we need for the divorce. That's when I'd realized this wasn't just an affair. It was a long-term strategy, carefully planned and executed. Laura wanted out of our marriage, but she wanted to take everything with her. The house we'd bought together, the business I'd built after leaving the force, the college funds we'd saved for our daughters. I pulled out the first file and spread the contents across the small table I'd set up in the unit. Bank statements showing regular transfers from our joint account to an account I'd never seen before. Credit card bills for hotels, restaurants, gifts I'd never received. A paper trail of deception that stretched back almost a year. My phone buzzed. Text message from Danny Morrison. Jay, we need to talk. That wasn't cool tonight. I deleted it without responding. Danny had made his choice when he sat at that table and watched Laura humiliate me. They all had. The next file contained photographs. Laura and Scott at restaurants across town, thinking they were safe because they'd driven an hour from home. Laura and Scott entering his downtown condo, her hand on his back, his arm around her waist. Laura and Scott at a hotel in Portland last month when she'd told me she was visiting her sister. I'd taken some of these pictures myself, following them on weekends when I was supposed to be working construction jobs. Others came from Rick Morris, my old partner from the force, who now ran a private security company. Rick didn't ask questions and he didn't judge. He just delivered results. My phone rang. Laura, where are you? She demanded. The girls are asking why you left dinner early. I'm working, I said. Someone has to pay for your lawyer. Don't be dramatic, Jason. This is better for everyone. We both know this marriage has been over for years. You're right, I said. It has been over. I just didn't realize you'd already moved on. Silence on the other end. Then, what's that supposed to mean? Nothing, Laura. I'll be home later. Kiss the girls goodnight for me. I hung up and opened the third file. This one contained the real ammunition. Documents Rick had obtained through channels I didn't ask about. Scott's business records, showing a pattern of financial irregularities that would interest the IRS. His divorce decree, revealing he'd hidden assets from his ex-wife. His gym membership records, showing he'd been using the facilities to conduct personal training sessions off the books, avoiding taxes and insurance liability. Everyone had secrets. The trick was knowing which ones mattered. I spent another hour organizing everything into neat piles, cross-referencing dates and times, building a timeline of deception. Laura thought she was smart, but she'd made mistakes. They always did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo message from Kim's Instagram account, already posted for her 1,000 followers to see. The picture showed me walking out of the restaurant, with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong. #divorce drama, #birthday, fail #messy." 47 likes already. The comments were starting to roll in from people who didn't know me, didn't know the situation, but were happy to judge based on a 10-second video clip. I screenshotted the post and added it to Box C. The drive home took me through the center of town, past the coffee shop where Laura and I had our first date, past the church where we'd gotten married, past the elementary school where our daughters Beth and Janie were students. 15 years of history, reduced to a manila envelope and a viral social media post. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Laura's BMW was gone, probably back at Scott's place, celebrating their successful ambush. I let myself in through the back door and climbed the stairs to check on the girls. Beth, 12 years old, and already showing signs of Laura's sharp intelligence, was reading under her covers with a flashlight. She looked up when I opened her door. "Dad, why did you leave dinner early? Mom said you were being immature." I sat on the edge of her bed and smoothed her dark hair, so much like mine. "Sometimes adults have disagreements, sweetheart. It doesn't mean anyone's being immature." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard Mom on the phone last week. She was talking to Grandma Mara about lawyers and custody." Beth's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to leave, Dad." I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise." It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what it cost. I checked on Janie next. 9 years old, still young enough to sleep through family drama, she was curled up with her stuffed elephant, peaceful and innocent. I kissed her forehead and whispered that I loved her. Downstairs in my home office, I opened my laptop and began typing. If Laura wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real player looked like. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. The divorce papers revealed more than Laura probably realized. Her lawyer was Marcus Weinstein, one of the most expensive family attorneys in the state. The kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy someone, not just divorce them. The retainer alone would have cost $30,000, money Laura didn't have, not from our joint accounts, which I monitored carefully, which meant someone else was funding this war. I pulled up Scott's business records on my computer. Williams Fitness LLC, incorporated 3 years ago, 3 locations, gross revenue of $1.2 million last year. Plenty of money to fund a divorce designed to eliminate an inconvenient husband. My phone chimed with another message, this one from Rick Morris. "Package delivered as requested. Check your email." I opened my encrypted email account and found a folder of documents that made me smile for the first time all day. Scott Williams had made some interesting business decisions over the past year. Decisions that someone in the right position could use to cause him significant problems. I forwarded the files to a secure cloud account and began drafting a plan. Laura thought she'd won tonight, humiliating me in front of friends and family, turning my birthday into her victory celebration. She thought she held all the cards. She was about to learn that some games had more players than she'd realized. The gym at 6 in the morning was my sanctuary, the one place where everything made sense. Iron plates didn't lie or cheat or serve you divorce papers at your birthday dinner. They just sat there, honest and heavy, waiting for you to prove what you were made of. I was halfway through my deadlift set when Deb Martinez appeared beside me, coffee in one hand, disapproval written across her weathered face. At 55, Deb had been tending bar and collecting secrets in this town for 20 years. She knew everyone's business and kept most of it to herself, unless you gave her a reason not to. "You look like hell," she said without preamble. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." I racked the weight and grabbed my towel. The gym was mostly empty at this hour, just a few dedicated souls getting their workout in before the real world intruded. Scott Williams usually showed up around 7:30 after his morning run, but before his first client appointment, I'd been tracking his schedule for months. "Kim's little video has been shared 200 times since last night," Deb continued. "Half the town thinks you're an abusive husband who finally got what he deserved. And the other half thinks Laura's a cold-hearted witch who humiliated her husband for social media likes." Deb sipped her coffee. "Both sides are probably right." I moved to the bench press and started loading plates. "What do you hear about Scott Williams?" "Plenty. Man's got a reputation for sleeping with his clients' wives. Yours isn't the first marriage he's broken up." Deb leaned against the wall, studying me with sharp eyes. "But you already knew that, didn't you?" I did know it. Rick's investigation had turned up 3 other affairs over the past 2 years, all with married women, all ending in expensive divorces that left the husbands financially ruined. Scott had a type: successful women in unhappy marriages, women with assets worth pursuing. "His ex-wife might be interested in knowing about his side business," I said carefully. "Might be, especially since she's still fighting him over alimony payments." Deb's smile was razor sharp. "Funny how men who hide money during divorce proceedings get real upset when someone exposes their cash flow." I finished my workout and headed home to shower before the girls woke up. Laura's car was in the driveway, which meant she'd come home sometime after midnight, probably after celebrating her victory with Scott. The kitchen smelled like coffee and burned toast. Laura stood at the counter in her silk robe, the one I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago, scrolling through her phone with a satisfied expression. "Good morning," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot she'd made. "Morning." She didn't look up from her screen. "I assume you've seen the video by now." Hard to miss it. Kim's quite the filmmaker. Laura finally glanced at me, searching my face for signs of anger or distress. When she didn't find what she was looking for, her expression shifted slightly. "Jason, I want you to know this isn't personal. We've both changed over the years. We want different things now." "You're right," I said. "We do want different things." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table we'd bought when we first moved into this house. Beth had done her homework at this table. Janie had eaten her first solid food in the high chair we'd pulled up beside it. Now it was serving as a negotiation table for the end of our marriage. "I've been thinking about your proposal," I continued. "The custody arrangement, the financial settlement. I have some thoughts." Laura's eyebrows rose. She'd expected a fight, lawyers and court battles and angry phone calls. "Oh, I want to make this as easy as possible for the girls. They didn't ask for any of this." I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, where I'd spent the early morning hours drafting my response. "I'm willing to agree to joint custody, alternating weeks. You can have the house, but I want my half of the equity paid out over 5 years, not 10. Jason, I don't think you understand the financial." "I understand perfectly. You'll need to refinance to buy out my share. Shouldn't be a problem with your income and Scott's financial backing." The coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "Scott Williams, your business partner, the one who's been funding this divorce." I kept my voice conversational, like we were discussing weekend plans. "Marcus Weinstein doesn't work for free, Laura. $30,000 retainer plus hourly fees that'll run another 20 grand before this is over. That's a lot of money for someone who makes $60,000 a year." Laura set down her mug with shaking hands. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Scott's been very generous. The hotel bills, the restaurant tabs, the jewelry you've been wearing lately, even that new BMW you're driving, the one that's registered to Williams Fitness LLC. I stood up and refilled my coffee, giving her time to process. Through the kitchen window, I could see our neighbors getting ready for their day, walking dogs, backing cars out of driveways, living their normal lives, while mine exploded in slow motion. "How long have you known?" Laura asked quietly. "Long enough." I sat back down and met her eyes. "The question is, what are we going to do about it? What do you want?" "I want you to be honest with our daughters about why this marriage is ending. I want you to stop painting me as the villain in your social media posts, and I want Scott Williams to understand that actions have consequences." Laura's face went pale. "Jason, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that Scott should be more careful about his business practices, tax evasion, insurance fraud, hiding assets from his ex-wife. The IRS takes a dim view of that kind of behavior. You can't prove any of that." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. Scott entering a downtown building that housed several accounting firms, carrying a briefcase, looking around nervously like a man with something to hide. "Rick Morris is very good at his job," I said. 20 years on the force, another 10 in private security. He knows how to follow paper trails." Laura stared at the photo, her mind racing. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage I could do. "What do you want?" she repeated. "I want you to think very carefully about how you want this divorce to proceed. You can keep playing games, turning our family into entertainment for your friends, trying to destroy me in court. Or you can act like an adult and we can handle this quietly. And if I choose the quiet route, then Scott's business problems remain his business problems. His tax issues stay between him and the IRS. His ex-wife never finds out about the money he's been hiding." Laura was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. Upstairs, I could hear the girls getting ready for school, their voices carrying down the hallway as they argued over bathroom time. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said finally. "Yes, you did. You planned this for months, Laura. The affair, the divorce strategy, the public humiliation. You wanted to hurt me, and you wanted everyone to see it happen." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but I felt nothing. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to save this marriage, had died somewhere between the birthday cake and the divorce papers. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you get what you wanted. A divorce, a fresh start, a chance to be with Scott without sneaking around." I stood up and rinsed my coffee mug in the sink. "But you get it on my terms, not yours." I left her sitting at the kitchen table and went upstairs to say goodbye to my daughters. They were getting dressed for school, arguing about who had borrowed whose sweater, normal sisters being normal kids. "Dad, can you drive us to school today?" Beth asked. "Mom seems upset about something." "Sure, sweetheart. Get your backpacks." As we drove toward the elementary school, Janie chattered about her upcoming science project while Beth stared out the window, lost in thought. At a red light, she turned to me. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" The question caught me off guard. 12 years old, and already she was trying to take care of everyone else. "I'm going to be fine, baby. Better than fine." Promise? I promise. It was the second promise I'd made to my daughters in 12 hours. I intended to keep them both. Scott Williams arrived at his downtown gym at exactly 7:45, just like every Tuesday for the past 3 months. I watched from the coffee shop across the street as he parked his black Porsche in the handicapped space, another small violation to add to the growing list. The man moved with the confident swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Designer workout clothes, perfect hair, the kind of smile that had probably been getting him out of trouble since high school. He nodded to the desk staff, grabbed a towel from the stack by the door, and headed toward the locker room. I gave him 5 minutes, then followed. The locker room was empty except for Scott, who was changing into his training clothes while talking loudly on his phone. I recognized the voice on the other end, Marcus Weinstein, Laura's divorce attorney. "No, the husband's not going to be a problem," Scott was saying. "Laura says he's completely broken down, crying, begging her to reconsider. Pathetic, really." I opened a locker 3 rows away and began changing into my workout clothes, moving quietly. "The financial records? Yeah, we've got everything we need. Guy's been hiding money in construction accounts, probably skimming cash jobs. Laura's documented all of it." That was interesting. Laura had been busy, apparently manufacturing evidence of financial impropriety. Too bad for her that I'd been documenting everything from the beginning, including the legitimate business accounts she was trying to paint as suspicious. "Trust me, Marcus, by the time we're done with this guy, he'll be lucky to get supervised visitation with his kids." Scott laughed at something Weinstein said, then hung up and tossed his phone into his locker. He grabbed his water bottle and headed toward the gym floor, whistling. I waited until he was gone, then approached his locker. It wasn't locked. Scott's arrogance extended to assuming no one would dare mess with his belongings. Inside, his phone sat on top of his street clothes, next to his wallet and car keys. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. The conversation I'd just overheard was recorded on the small digital device Rick had helped me plant in the locker room yesterday. Perfectly legal since this was a public space and Scott had been speaking loudly enough for anyone to hear. But I did leave something behind. A single photograph taped to the inside of his locker door. Scott and Laura at a hotel in Portland, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing at some private joke. Across the bottom, I'd written in red ink, "Smile for the camera." I finished changing and headed to the weight room, where Scott was setting up for his morning workout. He liked to train heavy on Tuesdays, deadlifts and squats, the kind of exercises that required focus and concentration, the kind where a small distraction could be dangerous. I positioned myself at the bench press station where I could watch him work. Scott loaded 4 plates onto the barbell, stretched for a few minutes, then approached the bar. He was strong, I'd give him that. Probably spent more time in the gym than I did. He pulled the first rep clean, then the second. On the third rep, his phone started ringing from across the room. He glanced toward the sound, his concentration broken, and the bar wavered slightly in his hands. Not enough to cause injury, just enough to remind him that focus mattered. He finished his set and walked over to check his phone. From where I sat, I could see his face change as he read whatever message had come through. Probably Laura, wondering why he wasn't answering her calls. 20 minutes later, Scott headed back to the locker room. I gave him a head start, then followed. The shouting started before I reached the door. "What the hell is this?" Scott's voice echoed off the tile walls. "Who did this?" I walked in to find him staring at his open locker, the photograph in his hand, his face flushed with anger and something else. Fear, maybe, or the first recognition that his perfect plan might have some flaws. problem? I asked, opening my own locker. Scott spun around, his eyes wild. Did you do this? Do what? I glanced at the photo he was holding. Nice picture. You two look happy. You son of a witch, you've been following us. Following you? Scott, I barely know you exist. I pulled my street clothes from the locker and began changing. Although I have to say, you might want to be more careful about where you conduct your business. Never know who might be watching. Scott stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. Listen to me very carefully, old man. You need to back off. Laura's made her choice, and it's not you. You're absolutely right, I said, pulling on my shirt. Laura has made her choice. Question is, are you prepared for the consequences of that choice? What's that supposed to mean? I closed my locker and turned to face him. It means that actions have consequences, Scott. You wanted to play games with my family? Turn my marriage into your entertainment. That's fine. But games go both ways. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, I spent 20 years as a cop in this town. I know how things work. I know which judges play golf together on weekends, which lawyers drink at which bars, which business owners cut corners on their taxes. I stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. I know, for example, that the IRS is very interested in fitness businesses that operate primarily in cash. Scott's face went pale. You can't prove anything. Can't I? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Scott's gym after hours with several people entering through the back door. Interesting client base you've got there. A lot of married women, a lot of cash transactions that somehow don't make it into your business records. Those are legitimate training sessions. I'm sure they are. Just like I'm sure the IRS will find your record keeping completely above board when they audit you next month. Scott grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. You fool. You can't do this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Scott, I spent 2 decades dealing with people who thought they were tougher than me. You want to know what I learned? I twisted out of his grip with a move that left him stumbling backward. I learned that everyone breaks eventually. Everyone has a pressure point, a weakness, something they can't afford to lose. I straightened my jacket and picked up my gym bag. The trick is finding it. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Scott, you might want to check with your insurance company about those after-hours training sessions. Liability can be a real problem when you're operating outside your policy guidelines. I left him standing there, staring at the photograph, probably trying to calculate how much damage I could do to his carefully constructed life. The answer was plenty. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. Text message from Rick Morris. Package delivered to Weinstein's office. Also, your wife's been making some interesting phone calls. I called him back as I drove toward the construction site where I was supposed to meet my crew. What kind of phone calls? Panicked ones. She called Scott 6 times this morning, then Weinstein, then her parents. Sounds like someone's starting to realize this isn't going to be as easy as they thought. Good. What about the other thing? IRS audit notification was hand-delivered to Williams Fitness LLC this morning. Funny thing about anonymous tips. They take them very seriously when they come with documentation. I smiled as I pulled into the construction site. My crew was already there, unloading equipment from the trucks, getting ready for another day of honest work. These were good men, guys who'd worked with me for years, who knew the value of loyalty and hard work. Jay, Tommy Kowalski waved me over to where he was studying the building plans. We've got a problem with the electrical layout. City inspector wants us to move the main panel. I spent the next hour dealing with permits and inspections, the mundane details of running a business. It was good to focus on something concrete, something that made sense. In construction, you built things to last. You used quality materials, followed the building codes, created something solid and permanent. Unlike marriages, apparently. My phone rang around 10. Laura. We need to talk, she said without preamble. I'm working. Jason, please. Scott is... He's very upset about something that happened at the gym this morning. Really? What happened? You know what happened. This has to stop. I walked away from my crew, finding a quiet spot behind the building where we could talk privately. What has to stop, Laura? I haven't done anything except go to the gym and mind my own business. Someone sent photos to Marcus Weinstein's office. Photos of Scott and me. That's terrible. I hope they were flattering. This isn't funny, Jason. If these pictures become public, Then what? People will know you're having an affair? Laura, half the town already knows. Kim made sure of that with her little video last night. This is different, and you know it. These photos, they could ruin Scott's business. His business is already ruined. The IRS tends to be thorough when they audit someone. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, how did you know about the audit? Lucky guess. Or maybe Scott's not as careful as he thinks he is. Jason, please, we can work this out. The divorce doesn't have to be ugly. You're right, it doesn't. All you have to do is be reasonable. What do you want? I want you to withdraw the allegations of financial impropriety. I want you to agree to 50-50 custody with no restrictions. And I want Scott Williams to disappear from my daughter's lives permanently. I can't ask him to. You're not asking, Laura. You're telling. Because if you don't, those photos are going to end up in the hands of every gossip blogger in the state. Scott's ex-wife is going to get copies, along with documentation of all the assets he's been hiding, and the IRS audit is going to expand to include his personal finances. Another long silence. You've changed, she said finally. No, Laura. I finally stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. I hung up and walked back to my crew, who were waiting for instructions about the electrical panel. Normal problems with normal solutions, the kind of challenges I understood. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. I showed the message to Tommy, who read it and shook his head. Divorce? He asked. Yeah. My ex-wife used to send me stuff like that. Lasted about 6 months, then she got bored and moved on. Tommy handed me back the phone. Of course, she didn't have as much to lose as your wife does. What makes you say that? Tommy grinned. Because she wasn't stupid enough to mess with you. The call came at 2 in the morning, jolting me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Laura's name flashed on my phone screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something about a 2 a.m. call felt urgent. Jason, thank God. Laura's voice was shaky, barely controlled panic. I need your help. What's wrong? Are the girls okay? The girls are fine. They're at my parents' house. It's Scott. Something's happened. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What kind of something? Someone broke into his condo, trashed the place. The police think it might be related to his business. I almost smiled. Rick Morris had outdone himself this time. That's terrible, I said. I hope he's okay. Jason, please! I know you're behind this. Behind what? A break-in? Laura, I'm a contractor, not a criminal. If someone broke into Scott's place, maybe he should think about why. The police found something, a note. It said, actions have consequences. That was a nice touch. Rick had a flair for the dramatic. Sounds like Scott's made some enemies. What does this have to do with me? He thinks you hired someone. He wants to call the police, file a complaint. Based on what evidence? A note that could have been written by anyone? I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Laura, if Scott wants to involve the police, that's his choice. But he might want to think carefully about inviting that kind of scrutiny into his life. What do you mean? I mean that police investigations tend to be thorough. They look into backgrounds, financial records, business practices. Scott's got a lot of secrets, Laura. Some of them might not survive close examination. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, trying to process what I was telling her. How much do you know? She asked finally. Enough. The question is, how much do you know about Scott's business practices, his financial situation, the way he's been funding your divorce? I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Williams Fitness LLC is in serious trouble, Laura, has been for months. The IRS audit is just the beginning. Scott's been using his gyms to launder money for some very unpleasant people. People who don't appreciate having their business disrupted. That wasn't entirely true, but it sounded plausible. And it would explain why someone might want to send Scott a message. That's impossible. Scott's business is legitimate. Is it? Then why does he conduct so many training sessions off the books? Why does he have 3 different sets of financial records? Why is he paying rent on facilities he doesn't list as business addresses? Silence. Laura was smart enough to recognize the truth when she heard it. Even if that's true, she said finally, it doesn't justify what you're doing. What am I doing, Laura? I'm getting divorced from my cheating wife and trying to protect my daughters from the fallout. Everything else is just coincidence. Jason, please, we can end this now. I'll withdraw the financial allegations, agree to joint custody. Whatever you want. Just leave Scott alone. I'm not doing anything to Scott, but I can't control what other people do, especially people who don't like having their business operations disrupted by IRS investigations. It was a masterful lie, built on just enough truth to be believable. Scott's business was dirty. That part was real. The IRS audit was real. The break-in was real, even if the motivation wasn't what Laura thought. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to think very carefully about whether Scott Williams is worth destroying your relationship with your daughters. Because that's what's going to happen, Laura. When all of this comes out, and it will come out, Beth and Janie are going to know exactly why their family fell apart. Are you threatening my children? I'm protecting them. From you, from Scott, from the mess you've created." I walked back to the bed and sat down. "The girls love you, Laura, but they're not stupid. They're going to figure out that Mommy was sleeping with another man while Daddy was working to support the family. You fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who's going to be there for his daughters when their mother's poor choices catch up with her." I hung up and turned off the phone. Let her sit with that for a while. The next morning brought news that Scott's troubles were multiplying. Rick called at 7 with an update. The break-in spooked him. He's talking about leaving town, maybe relocating to Florida where his brother lives. That would solve a lot of problems. It would. But there's a complication. Your wife spent the night at his place. Neighbors saw her car there until about 4 this morning. That was interesting. Laura was either providing comfort or trying to talk Scott out of running. Either way, it showed she was more invested in this relationship than I'd thought. Any word on the IRS situation? They've frozen his business accounts pending the audit. He can't pay his staff, can't make his lease payments. The gyms will probably be closed by the end of the week. I felt a moment of sympathy for Scott's employees, people who were losing their jobs because of their boss's poor choices. But sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. What about his personal finances? That's where it gets interesting. Turns out Scott's been living way beyond his means. The Porsche is leased, the condo is mortgaged to the hilt, even his clothes are bought on credit. Man's been running a financial house of cards for years. And now the cards are falling. Like dominoes. His ex-wife's lawyer filed a motion yesterday to garnish his accounts for back alimony. She got copies of those photos you wanted me to share, realized he's been hiding assets. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Scott Williams was discovering that actions really did have consequences, and Laura was learning that her knight in shining armor was actually made of tinfoil. I spent the morning at the construction site, trying to focus on work while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from Laura. By noon, she'd called 6 times and sent a dozen texts, each one more desperate than the last. Finally, I answered. "We need to meet," she said immediately. "Face to face. I'm working." "Jason, please. This is important." Something in her voice made me pause. This wasn't the angry, entitled Laura I'd been dealing with for months. This was someone who was genuinely scared. "Where?" "The coffee shop on Main Street. 1 hour." I found her sitting in a corner booth, wearing sunglasses despite being indoors, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "What's so urgent that it couldn't wait until tonight?" Laura pulled off her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes and dark circles that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Scott's gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know. He left sometime this morning, packed a suitcase, emptied what was left in his bank account, and disappeared." She looked at me with something approaching desperation. "Jason, I think he's in real trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where people get hurt. Last night, after the break-in, he got a phone call. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but he was terrified. Kept saying, 'I can fix this,' and 'just give me more time.'" I ordered coffee from the waitress and considered Laura's story. It was possible that Scott really was involved with dangerous people, but more likely he was just running from his collapsing life. Maybe he decided Florida sounded nice this time of year. "This isn't a joke, Jason. If Scott's involved with criminals, if they think I know something..." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "What do you want from me?" "Protection. For me and the girls. If these people think Scott told me about their business..." "Laura, stop. You're being paranoid. Scott ran because his life fell apart, not because he's afraid of mobsters." "How can you be so sure?" Because I know exactly why Scott's life fell apart, and it has nothing to do with organized crime. Laura stared at me across the table, and I could see the moment when understanding dawned. You did this. All of it. The audit, the break-in, everything. I did what needed to be done to protect my family. Scott never hurt anyone. He's just a businessman who made some mistakes. Scott Williams is a hunter who targets married women and destroys families for profit. You're not his first sufferer, Laura, and you wouldn't have been his last. Sufferer? Laura's voice rose, drawing looks from other customers. I'm not a sufferer. I chose to be with Scott because he manipulated you into it. The expensive dinners, the gifts, the attention. Scott's been running this con for years, Laura. Find an unhappy wife, romance her, convince her to divorce her husband, and take him for everything she can get. Then Scott disappears with his share of the proceeds. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. Scott with another woman at the same restaurant where he'd taken Laura on their first date. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 months ago, while Scott was supposedly committed to Laura. Her name is Jennifer Walsh. Divorced her husband last year after a 6-month affair with Scott. He helped her take the poor fool for $200,000 in the settlement, then disappeared when the money ran out. Laura stared at the photo, her face pale. There are others, I continued. Scott's been running this scam for years. You were just the latest mark. I don't believe you. I showed her another photo, then another. Different women, same pattern. Scott Williams, serial homewrecker, moving from one target to the next like a shark following blood in the water. The break-in wasn't about organized crime, Laura. It was about justice. Scott Williams finally picked the wrong family to destroy. Laura was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away before anyone noticed. Why didn't you just tell me? If you knew what he was doing, why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of being a jealous, controlling husband trying to sabotage your happiness? She didn't answer because we both knew the truth. So what happens now? She asked finally. Now you decide what kind of person you want to be. You can keep playing sufferer, keep blaming everyone else for your choices. Or you can grow up and start thinking about what's best for our daughters. What about the divorce? The divorce proceeds as planned. Joint custody, fair division of assets, no more games. I stood up and dropped a $5 bill on the table. But Scott Williams stays out of our lives permanently. If I see him anywhere near you or the girls, if he contacts you in any way, I'll make sure his next disappearing act is permanent. Jason, wait. I paused at the door. I'm sorry for all of it. The affair, the birthday dinner, the way I've treated you. I know you are, Laura, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken. I left her sitting in the coffee shop, staring at the photos of her Prince Charming with his other sufferers, finally understanding that she'd been just another mark in a long con. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. Text message from Rick. Scott Williams bought a one-way ticket to Miami. Flight leaves in 2 hours. I typed back, let him go. Job's done. And it was. Scott Williams was gone, Laura's illusions were shattered, and my daughters were safe from a man who would have used them as leverage in his games. The divorce would proceed quietly now, without the drama Laura had originally planned. She'd agree to my terms because she had no choice, and because she finally understood the consequences of the game she'd been playing. I'd won. But victory felt hollow, like eating ashes. 15 years of marriage reduced to a tactical victory over a con man and his willing accomplice. 2 daughters who would grow up in a broken home because their mother chose excitement over stability. But they'd be safe, and sometimes that was the best you could do. 3 weeks later, Laura signed the divorce papers without a lawyer present. We met at a neutral location, the law office of Patricia Chen, a family mediator who specialized in uncontested divorces. Laura looked smaller somehow, diminished by the collapse of her grand romantic fantasy. Joint custody, alternating weeks, Patricia read from the agreement. Equal division of assets, with Mr. Halpern buying out Mrs. Halpern's share of the family business. No alimony, no child support beyond direct expenses. Laura nodded mechanically. The fight had gone out of her completely. And the house? I'm keeping the house, Laura said quietly. Jason's taking his equity in cash. It was a fair deal, better than I'd expected when this whole mess started. Laura got to stay in the family home with the girls, maintaining some stability in their lives. I got my freedom and enough money to start over. Any questions about the custody arrangement? Patricia asked. What about holidays? Laura looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down. Christmas, birthdays, that sort of thing. We'll figure it out as we go, I said, like adults. Patricia witnessed our signatures and filed the papers with the court. Just like that, 15 years of marriage became a legal document in a manila folder. The decree will be final in 30 days, Patricia said as we gathered our things. Congratulations on handling this so amicably. Amicably. If she only knew. Laura and I walked out of the building together, an awkward silence stretching between us. In the parking lot, she finally spoke. I heard from Scott yesterday. I stopped walking. I thought we agreed. He called to apologize and to warn me. Laura pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. He says you're dangerous, that I should be careful around you. The message was typical Scott Williams, dramatic, self-serving, designed to make him look like the concerned ex-lover protecting his former flame from her dangerous husband. Are you dangerous, I mean? I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, I would have said no. I was Jason Halpern, ex-cop turned contractor, devoted father and faithful husband, a good man who played by the rules and trusted in the system. But that man had been naive. He'd believed that good behavior would be rewarded, that loyalty meant something, that marriage vows were more than just words. To people who threaten my family, yes, I'm very dangerous. Laura studied my face, looking for the man she'd married 15 years ago. I wasn't sure he existed anymore. The girls want to have dinner with both of us tonight, she said finally. Together, I mean. And they're having trouble understanding why we can't all just get along now that the grown-up problems are solved. That's not a good idea. Please, Jason, just this once. Let them see that we can be civil to each other. I thought about Beth and Janie, trying to navigate the wreckage of their parents' marriage, looking for some sign that the adults in their lives could act like adults. Fine, one dinner, but this doesn't become a regular thing. I know. We agreed to meet at Romano's, a family restaurant where the girls could get pizza and we could maintain the pretense of being a normal divorced couple working together for their children's sake. I arrived first and chose a table in the back, away from the main dining room. Laura showed up 10 minutes later with Beth and Janie, both girls dressed up like this was a special occasion. Daddy! Janie launched herself into my arms, all 9-year-old enthusiasm and strawberry-scented shampoo. Mom said we could have dessert if we eat all our vegetables. Did she now? I hugged my youngest daughter, marveling at how she could make everything seem simple just by being happy to see me. Beth was more reserved, studying both her parents with the serious expression she'd inherited from me. Are you guys going to get back together? She asked without preamble. Laura and I exchanged glances. No, sweetheart, I said gently. Mom and I are going to stay divorced, but that doesn't change how much we both love you. But you're having dinner together. Because we're your parents, and we want to show you that we can still be friends even though we are not married anymore. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Laura and I would never be friends. Too much had happened. Too many lines had been crossed. But we could be civil for the sake of our daughters. The waitress took our orders. Pizza for the girls, salads for the adults who were both too nervous to eat. For an hour, we managed to maintain the fiction of being a functional family. The girls chattered about school and friends and their upcoming dance recital, normal kid concerns that had nothing to do with divorce papers and custody agreements. It was almost peaceful. Then Danny Morrison walked into the restaurant. My former best friend looked around the dining room until he spotted our table, then walked over with the determined expression of a man who'd been drinking for courage. Jay, he said, stopping beside our table. We need to talk. Not now, Danny. I nodded toward the girls. This isn't the time or place. When is the right time? You won't return my calls. You avoid me at the gym. You act like I don't exist. Beth and Janie were staring at Danny with wide eyes, sensing the tension, but not understanding it. Girls, why don't you go wash your hands? Laura said quickly. We'll order dessert when you get back. They left reluctantly, glancing back at the table as they walked toward the restrooms. You've got 2 minutes, I told Danny. What happened to us, man? We've been friends for 20 years. I was best man at your wedding, godfather to your kids. Now you look at me like I'm a stranger. You sat at that table 3 weeks ago and watched my wife humiliate me for her friend's entertainment. You knew what was going to happen and you said nothing. Danny's face flushed. I didn't know about the divorce papers. I thought it was just a birthday dinner. Bees. Jennifer told you. She tells you everything Kim posts on social media. Okay, maybe I knew something was up, but what was I supposed to do? Call you and spoil the surprise? You were supposed to be my friend. I am your friend. That's why I'm here now, trying to fix this. I stood up, throwing my napkin on the table. There's nothing to fix, Danny. You made your choice that night. You chose to be entertained by my pain rather than stand up for your friend. Jay, come on. Don't throw away 20 years over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake. It was a choice that revealed who you really are. I pulled out my wallet and left money on the table for dinner. You're not the man I thought you were, Danny. Neither is Jennifer. Neither was Laura. So that's it? You're going to cut everyone out of your life? I'm going to surround myself with people I can trust. That list has gotten a lot shorter lately. Danny looked at Laura, who had remained silent during our exchange. Talk to him, Danny pleaded. Tell him he's being unreasonable. Laura shook her head. I can't do that, Danny. Jason has every right to choose his friends. This is crazy. You're both crazy. The girls returned from the bathroom, sensing the tension immediately. Is everything okay? Beth asked. Everything's fine, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. Uncle Danny was just leaving. Danny looked at the girls, then back at me. This isn't over, Jay. Yes, it is. He walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat. I sat back down and tried to recapture the peaceful mood from earlier, but it was gone. Who was that man? Janie asked. Someone Daddy used to know, Laura answered before I could speak. We ordered dessert and tried to pretend nothing had happened, but the spell was broken. The girls picked at their ice cream while Laura and I made awkward small talk about school schedules and pickup times. When we finally left the restaurant, Beth hugged both of us goodbye, but I could see the questions in her eyes. She was too smart not to notice that something fundamental had changed in her father, something that went beyond the divorce. Will you be okay? Laura asked as we stood beside our cars. I'm fine. No, you're not, and I don't think you have been for a long time. She studied my face in the parking lot lights. What happened to you, Jason? You used to be so different. I grew up, finally figured out how the world really works. The world doesn't have to be so dark. Doesn't it? Look around, Laura. Look at what people do to each other when they think they can get away with it. Look at what you did to me. I know I hurt you. You tried to destroy me. You and Scott planned it for months, figured out how to take everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing. If I hadn't fought back, I'd be living in a studio apartment somewhere, seeing my daughters every other weekend, paying alimony to support your new life with a con man. Laura was quiet for a moment. You're right, we did plan it, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Then what does? I looked at this woman I'd loved for 15 years, this stranger who'd shared my bed and raised my children and plotted my destruction. Nothing fixes it, Laura. Some things, once they're broken, stay broken forever. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights, finally understanding the full cost of her choices. At home, my new home, a small house I'd rented across town, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the man I used to be. The man who'd believed in second chances and the fundamental goodness of people. The man who'd trusted his wife and his friends, and the system he'd served for 20 years. That man was gone, destroyed as thoroughly as if he'd died in the line of duty. In his place was someone harder, more cynical, more willing to fight fire with fire. Someone who'd learned that sometimes, to protect the people you love, you have to become the villain in someone else's story. My phone buzzed. Text message from Beth. Thanks for dinner, Dad. I love you. I typed back, I love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. Whatever I'd become, whatever I'd lost in the process of protecting my family, it was worth it for messages like that. My daughters were safe, their future secure, their father still a part of their lives. Scott Williams was gone, Laura's illusions were shattered, and the friends who'd betrayed me had learned the cost of their choices. I'd won every battle that mattered. The war was over, and I was still standing. Some might call that justice. Others might call it revenge. I called it Tuesday.